Well, this is kind of funny. Apparently, even though, President Donald Trump has ended the illegal U.S. occupation of Syria, at least for the most part, he's still illegally occupying part of Syria to defend the oil fields, as I discussed recently. But now he's decided, instead of, withdrawing those troops and bringing them back to the United States, he's, ordered them to, leave Syria and instead illegally invade Iraq. Now, it was announced some days ago that the troops that were ordered out of Syria would be, instead of coming home, entering Iraq for some period of time and joining the mission there. But apparently, Trump did not ask permission of the Iraqi government. And typically, a country that sends its troops into another country without, that country's permission is typically viewed as an invader. Because that's, just kind of what the word means. So I guess this is now officially the second time that the U.S. has invaded Iraq, the first time, of course, being in 2003. Now, this second invasion of Iraq comes at a time when, the U.S. troop presence in Iraq is not particularly popular amongst the ordinary people. And, of course, the government there is not particularly popular amongst the people either. So even had, Trump asked permission to come into Iraq, there might have been a possibility that the Iraqis said, no, we don't want your troops here. They might have said, hey, we'll let you, drive through Iraq and leave, but we don't want any more U.S. troops here than there already are because, the people are breathing down our neck. Iraq has had some serious protests lately. Apparently, I guess they weren't quite as well, actually, they're about on the same level as Lebanon is experiencing right now. I mean, things got pretty violent in Baghdad for a couple days. I should look into that. I don't know what's happened to that recently, but I guess things must have calmed down a little bit. But nevertheless, we're just coming off of these massive, popular uprisings in Iraq. The government can't be pulling this kind of crap and tolerating this. So they had to come out pretty strong against this and make it clear that, hey, they did not allow this. They're not the ones letting more U.S. troops into the country because, of course, the people don't want that. They're very upset and they want them out. And they weren't as strong worded as they could have been, but they were, making it clear, hey, it's not okay. We're going to go through the, the international channels, and, we expect the international community, whatever, to do their part, blah, blah, blah. And I think all this says, quite a bit about, the U.S.'s mission in the Middle East. Because really, if the U.S. can't do something as simple as, send some extra troops from Syria into Iraq and without Iraq getting all upset, what has the U.S. accomplished? Through its, 2-decade-long series of wars, focused mainly in Iraq. You would think that Iraq would be, ground zero for whatever the U.S.'s change they were hoping to bring to the Middle East. You would think that Iraq would be, their showcase state. By now, Iraq should be, an ally on the level of, that, say, West Germany was in the 1970s. But alas, that is not the case. The U.S. is not popular, even in Iraq, even in the country in which they've had the most influence. The U.S. is not, seen as the great grandfatherly power that is lording over all these countries. People don't look favorably upon U.S. empire. And again, if after 20 years of influence in this region, if the U.S. hasn't been able to even convince the Iraqis that, they're angels, well, then I don't think the U.S. has accomplished anything. And obviously, I didn't think that they did anyway. But this is just, I think, an interesting anecdote which demonstrates that. Because even by, the neocons' own standards, what they had hoped to achieve in the Middle East, their utopian goals of turning, the Middle East into Western Europe, they've completely failed. They did not, replace an anti-U.S. regime, that of Saddam Hussein's, with a pro-U.S. regime. which that wasn't even the neocon goal. That was just the standard hawk goal. That was like, the John Bolton school of thought was like, well, we're not going to replace, Saddam Hussein with a great, Western government, but at least we'll get one that is U.S. sycophants. And they couldn't achieve that. Now, I guess the situation's calmed down a bit because the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, the former CEO of Boeing, I believe, so a total, military-industrial complex shill. Nobody even bats an eyelash at that in Washington. There were no concerns, when he was appointed, that there may be some conflict of interest, that one of the former head of one of the biggest defense contractors is now running the Pentagon, because it's understood that there's just a revolving door there, and that the American foreign policy is not something that is decided based on what the interests of the American people are, but rather what the interests of people like Mark Esper and the people at Boeing and Raytheon and Lockheed and all the other defense contractors. And of course, they're not the only ones making U.S. foreign policy, but they're very important stakeholders, certainly much more important than the average American. American foreign policy, and this is getting into a bit of a tangent, but American foreign policy is said to be, conducted in the interest of the American people, but in fact it is conducted in the interest of certain people who happen to be American in most cases. Mark Esper and his former colleagues, of course, being, some of those select people. Now, anyway, back to Iraq. Mark Esper was in Baghdad today, I believe, meeting with the Iraqi defense minister, talking about the U.S. troops that invaded western Iraq from Syria this week. And, of course, the defense minister was not very happy about, at least publicly, wasn't very happy about the U.S. invading his country. But apparently they worked out some sort of an agreement to where the U.S. troops, the additional U.S. troops, because I believe there are always U.S. troops in Iraq. But these additional ones that invaded the country from Syria without the government's permission, they'll be gone within 4 weeks, they said. But that seems like a long time to me. It shouldn't take them that long. If they wanted to get out of there, I'm sure that they could be out of there tomorrow. All they would have to do is drive down to Basra and hop on a boat. Or actually, it'd probably be more likely that they, go to Kuwait. It's not like the U.S. has some inability to get people out of there. There's, the U.S. Navy is all over there. So these guys could be out of there, immediately. I don't know why the Iraqis are tolerating this, but, obviously they have to put up a much tougher face in public than they are in private, because, in private, I think that they are a bit more beholden to the U.S. than they want to let on. But of course, the fact that they have to act like they are so anti-American, I think itself is, evidence of just how ineffective U.S. policy has been in the Middle East. I mean, by this point after World War II, 20 years on or so, the U.S. had already pretty much convinced most of the German people that they themselves, were an inherently evil race of people who deserved to be punished by, France, Britain, and the U.S. And so they were, pretty well whipped into being, American sycophants. And the U.S., for whatever reason, seems to have lost its edge. They had zero success in making the Arab people worship and kiss their boots. And so with that said, I think I'll end it off here. If you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.